Good evening, everyone. My name is Abby, and I'm one of the staff members here at the Belasco Library Idea Lab, and today we're going to do a live demo about printmaking. Printmaking is the art form where someone makes a design on one surface, so wood, linoleum. In this case, we're using a piece of plexiglass, and then transfers that design onto another surface. So normally it's transferred to paper. It could also be transferred to fabric. Today we'll just be using plexiglass and paper to make our printmaking designs. This demo is going to focus on the design Monotype. Monotype is a type of printmaking that makes a unique image once. So mono means one. In this case, we'll make a design, we'll transfer it to a paper, and even if we tried to make the same exact design again, it would be slightly different. It would be unique in its own way. I'm going to show 3 different types of monotyping techniques. The first one is the one available in our printmaking kit that you can check out from the library. It gives you the piece of plexiglass. We'll use a paintbrush, a palette knife, some printmaking ink, and a brayer to make the first design. First thing we need to do is add our ink to our plate. I'm going to use my palette knife just to get a little bit of ink on my plate. You do not need a lot of ink on your surface. If you put too much ink on, it won't transfer very well. When you try to put it on the paper, it will spread too thickly and it will ruin some of your design. So I'm just going to dab a little bit on. The printmaking ink that we use is water soluble and non-toxic. Water soluble means that it's easy to clean up with soap and water on things like hard surfaces, but it can still stain clothing. So I suggest wearing an apron when you make a project, or wear some clothes that you don't mind getting dirty. I like to put a surface on my table because even though it could easily clean from the table, I'm going to save myself some work, so I put some paper towels everywhere. I'm going to spread my ink across using a brayer. A brayer is different than a paint roller. A paint roller is a softer material, spongy-like. A brayer is made of rubber, so it is a denser material, and it spreads the ink differently than a roller would. My printmaking teacher back when I took an art class in college would say that it sounds like a sizzle when you drag your brayer across the ink, you know that you covered it with the right amount of ink. So now my plate is covered. I hold it up and you can see it's kind of see-through, so I'm going to put just a little bit more ink on. I'm starting to hear that sizzling like noise. So that's covered a lot better. The printmaking monotype that we're making today is considered a subtractive monotype. An additive monotype would be if you had a piece of plexiglass, you had your paintbrush, you dipped it in some paint, and you painted on the piece of plexiglass and then put the paper on. You're adding the paint to the surface. In this case, we add the ink to the surface, the whole thing, and we're going to be removing some of the ink away to create our design. In this case, we're going to grab our paintbrush. We're not going to use the bristle edge. We're actually using the butt of the paintbrush, the back of it, to scrape away some of the ink from the surface. So this would be pretty much the opposite of how you would normally make a piece of art on a piece of paper. Normally you would have a white piece of paper and a pencil, and you'd be adding that graphite, that gray-black pencil to the white paper. In this case, we are having a black surface, and we're using the paintbrush to remove the black away and leave the white spaces on the paper. I'm going to make a basic ladybug piece of art and make some circles. Printmaking, just like any art form, will take some practice. I've done multiple prints, but I would not say that even after doing a few, it's, I'm not a professional or anything like that, but I think it's super fun. I think it's a great art form for all ages. Right now I'm scribbling off large portions of an area where I want white space. I want the back of my ladybug to be mainly the paper color, and I want the spots to retain its black ink color. Every so often I'm wiping the back of my paintbrush off to not get too gunked up on ink. will take some time to make your design. The more complicated it is, the longer it will take. I will say that if you take too long to make a design, your ink might dry and it might be harder to transfer. So you want to keep that in mind for your first print. You don't want to spend forever on it. Give my ladybug some legs. And once I'm happy with my design, I'm going to take a piece of paper and place it right on top of my design, and I'm going to press down. So now we are transferring our design onto the paper. There's printmaking presses that you can use. They're rather expensive. You can use the back of your hand. I've seen techniques where you use a metal spoon and use the spoon to rub against the back. If your brayer is clean, I have an extra brayer right here, you can use a clean brayer to apply pressure to the back of your design. You want to make sure to get all the sides, all the corners, all the edges, trying to get as much as your design as possible transferred onto your paper. Once you think the whole thing has been transferred, you can take an edge and just peel it away. So there is my ladybug design. It looks like I did not get enough ink. Either I didn't get enough ink or I did not apply enough pressure to this part when I transferred it. But there's my basic monoprint. Fun thing you can do with printmaking is after you just made a print, you can grab another piece of paper and put it on top and apply pressure again. Because the ink is not as saturated on your plate anymore, it creates what's called a ghost print. It's like a secondary image, but it will be much lighter, most likely have a little bit less detail, but sometimes the ghost prints turn out kind of fun, so I like doing them every once in a while just to see what they look like. So like in this case, my ghost print is still pretty interesting, but it lost a lot of the detail of the ladybug spots. So that is the project that comes with the printmaking kit. I'm going to show some other different things that you can do to add different textures or lines to your monoprint type design using just things that might be around your house. So I'm going to put some more ink on my plate. It helps to do both horizontal and vertical rolls across your plate to try to cover it completely. So now I'm going to use a couple different things to make a different design on my plate. For example, if you have a tissue or a paper towel, you can crumple it up and you can use it to take away some of that ink in like a texture pattern. So I'm going to make kind of like a basic landscape, like a cloud, using the paper towel. I'm going to use a comb to make some lines across the bottom, make some grass. I'm doing this at different layers. It's going to overlap, give it some texture, and again, clean it off every so often so that the ink isn't just being pushed around, but also taken off the plate. So now I'm going to use the edge of my comb here as a flat piece of plastic. You can use something like a gift card that doesn't have a balance on it or something like that to brush off bigger portions. Make a kind of a house shape. Maybe this is a log cabin. And I'm going to use Q-tips to act very similar to the butt of a paintbrush to take away pretty straight lines. If you ever heard the phrase whistle while you work, I tend to make random sound effects when I work. So maybe I'm going to add a bush. So now that I'm happy with my design, I have some different textures in there. Let's see how it transfers on the paper. Paper, press down. I'm going to use my clean brayer, roll across. You can see I'm starting to get ink all over my hand, so I'm getting ink on the back of my paper. It doesn't bother me that's on the back, but you might want to wash your hands in between making your prints. I'm going to peel my image off. There is my print. I got my house, I got my bushes, I got my grass, and I got my cloud. So that's a different way to add some different textures and designs to your monoprint image. The last demo I'm going to do is I'm going to do some multiple colors. So we're going to layer 2 colors on top of each other to make our final image. I'm going to put this plate aside and I'm going to grab a new plate. I'm going to get some of this printmaking ink off my hands. So I have a spare plate right here, and this time I'm going to use acrylic paint instead of ink. Do not need a lot of paint to spread across the plate. If it's too saturated, if it's too thick, your design might not turn out the way you want it to. It might smudge. I'm just going to use a paintbrush instead of a brayer to spread the paint across my piece of plexiglass here. You can do the same thing with colored ink. There is colored ink. We just have black ink available in our printmaking kits, but there is multiple colored ink out there. I have a nice thin layer of this teal paint. And now I'm going to use some stencils to make my design. When you do multicolored printmaking, I always suggest starting with the lightest color and then working your way to the darkest color. It's easier for a dark color to cover a light color than it is for a light color to cover a dark color. For example, if you used a dark purple and then tried to print yellow on top of it, it'd be a lot harder for that yellow to cover up the purple. But if you had yellow and then covered it up with purple, that purple would be a lot stronger of a color to cover up those yellow spaces. So for the first time, I'm just going to use my circle stencil. I'm going to make another landscape style image. This is going to be my sun. I'm going to put it in the corner. For multicolored prints, I would suggest having a piece of paper that's cut roughly to the size of your print, because you kind of want to line it up each time. So I'm going to line the corner of my paper, and I'm going to press down, use my brayer, and I'm pushing that green onto the paper. Now this paper is kind of thin. There is printmaking paper out there. I'm just using scrap paper because I probably won't keep these prints today. But if you have a nicer print that you want to work on, you want to keep, printmaking paper is a better choice, and that is something that we give to you in the printmaking kits. Now I think I covered this paper with the green paint pretty well. So now when I peel it off, this circle is going to remain white. The rest of my paper should be covered with some kind of green. So then we have my basic shape. Here's my green, and I'm going to add my second layer of color of purple. So this second time, I want to keep some of the green, and I want to cover the other part of the green with a purple. I have a spare plate. Normally I would just go wash off my plates and come back, but because we have a demo, I want to make sure I get all of this stocked in the reasonable amount of time. I'm going to put my circle roughly where it was the last time, because I want my circle area to kind of stay white. I don't want color. But first I should put my paint on my plate. So I'm going to put my purple plate on my plate here, and I put way too much. I came out way faster than I thought it would. So I'm going to scrape some of that off. And I'm going to use my paintbrush, again, to spread the paint across my plate. So now I have a pretty good covering of purple. Now I'm going to try to put my circle roughly where it was last time, because I want to keep that white. I'm going to have this kind of mountain stencil that I cut out. I use cardstock to cut this out. I've also seen people use vinyl for the same kind of project. I'm just going to tap on my cardstock to kind of stick to the paint so it doesn't move. And again, try to line it up at the corner. Press down on it. And really get that paint to transfer to my paper. Because I use cardstock to make a stencil, I can easily see where the edges are. So if I wanted to, I can even take the time to really push the paint around those edges to make a cleaner line. I will say, if you're doing this with lots of different colors, printmaking paper will probably be the better choice, because this is just old printer paper. It will start to get too saturated and it might not hold up. It might want to start to break apart after getting too much layers of paint on it. I'm going to pull my design back. So this part of the paper got a little, so much ink on it that it's actually sticking to the plate. So that will, what will happen with cheaper paper. It's fine. But you can see the technique where it left the green mountains, it left my sun white, and now my sky is kind of a purpley color. So that's a fun way to do monoprint with just some basic acrylic paints. And those are the 3 types of prints I wanted to show you today. I wanted to show you the basic project that's available in the kit. We showed you how to add some textures with different supplies around the house, and then how to do multicolored prints with some basic acrylic paint. So thank you for coming today, and I hope you have a great evening. Next week we'll be doing relief printing on Wednesday. I hope you come back and join us again.